Let's talk money.
I don't have your money.
I know I'd be a lot happier with some extra cash.
Is this about money?
Obviously, this is all about money.
Oh, man, we got bills to pay, buddy.
With practical tips and a focus on scripture, let's talk money. With Dave and Reb. From More Than Enough. Real conversations about money for real people. Let's talk money.
Are you ready to talk money, Reb?
I'm ready to talk money.
It's just you and me in the studio together.
And it's almost your birthday.
Well, you and me and all the people that are joining us.
So I'm telling you,
podcast.
It's almost his birthday. His birthday's on Sunday.
Thank you for announcing that to the
He's going to be
world.
53.
23.
He has some issues around getting older. Anyway, happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you were born.
I'm glad that you're glad that I was born. So that's a whole story in and of itself. And we won't go into that today. So thank you for joining us.
It was a miracle you got to the earth. So yeah, it's good.
I was just going to say thank you for joining us in my birthday celebration here with Reb in the studio.
Well, we're talking money.
So.
This is Dave Answers Your Questions Part 2, because last week we had a list and we got halfway through. Mm-hmm. So now I added another question, so we'll probably get halfway through this list too.
Well, I want to give a shout out to notmine.ca first as we just come in and thank them for sponsoring the show. And I want to thank you for joining us on the show today. And if you need to listen to previous podcasts like last week's where we began this conversation around the questions that come in, notmine.ca actually does have the podcast posted there. Of course, they're at morethanenough.ca and chri.ca as well. So those websites have the podcast player. You just hit play and go. Of course, if you're listening on a podcasting platform, then it automatically comes in and you've subscribed and you checked. And if you're on YouTube, then hit subscribe and do all of that good stuff. And we love, again, the feedback on the different shows. And this is part of the reason we do a little bit the questions that come in, because as you send questions in, we get a pulse of, first of all, what you're thinking, where you're coming from, and where that's going to be. And maybe we can talk about that. No, we don't give any swag away for good questions. I know there's sometimes.
If you want swag, just send a message and we'll get you some. We got.
Says Reb. Don't tell them what it is. It's just surprise swag.
Okay, it's a surprise swag.
There we go.
If you want some.
All right. So you've got some questions that we're going to discuss.
And you're going to refer back to the verse we had last week in James 1. Can you remind us of what that is?
Yeah. So, whenever, and this is a very common verse that we quote, but I do want to back up a little bit in terms of the context, because when I went back to it this morning, I went, oh yeah, James is talking about trials and temptations. And, some of the questions we have, of course, and in our current context, I would say there, from a financial standpoint, we're seeing lots of volatility. We're seeing, I would say, lots of trials and temptations. The temptation to get discouraged, the temptation to spend money that you don't have, the temptation to run away, not sure what to go or what to do. And then, as he says, there just are trials that, and I would say some of us are having this. I don't know if it's communal trial, in the sense that we're all looking at the environment and seeing costs and asking the question, how do we manage the resources that we have well in the context of the change that's going on and the constant change around finances. So James just says this. He starts in verse 2, and I'll just read the first few verses. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds.
Okay, so I'm just going to say we need to eat these verses.
Absolutely.
Ourselves. We have our own set of trials.
This is why it stuck out to me this morning. Was
Consider
like,
it all joy.
I'm like, oh, there is. I'm needing a joy injection here. So So, and he says, consider it pure joy. That again. And then he puts the comma in there and he says, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And my prayer in reading that this morning was, Lord, I'm done persevering. And that it is the joy of the Lord that is our strength. And the Lord reminded me of that as well. Verse 4 says, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And again, in the current environment, there is an atmosphere of lack, and we'll just, we all feel it. We all talk about it. We all go, there's not enough and everything's too expensive. And what James is reminding us here is we need to persevere, because as we persevere, we come to a place where we become mature and complete, not lacking anything. Wow. And then verse 5, the famous verse, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must ask and believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. And that person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do.
Oh, man.
So we love to quote that middle verse that God gives wisdom, and it is absolutely true. But I felt this morning like reading the whole passage in terms of context, James encouraging us that in the middle of the trials and the temptations, in the middle of the things that we are all going through, in the middle of the questions, recognize that there's stuff going on, and that the Lord is bringing us, and the encouragement from James is persevere and keep asking God for wisdom every day. Keep asking God for what the next step or the next thing to do is.
And believe he's hearing you and he's answering. Yes. I'm just pausing because I can't believe how applicable. We're not going to tell you what our circumstances are right now, but our own circumstances that we're walking through this summer. I'm like, wow. This is so applicable to us. You should smile, because that would be some joy. You're just responding with joy, yes. Pure joy to the trials. But interesting, because we've recorded next week's show already, and we're talking about, just to give you a teaser, about how much God does care about what you're asking for in your life. And I'm just giving you a teaser. It's with Ray Borg, and you won't want to miss that next week. But so this is, I could just pause here and say, you guys all have got what you need for the day. So God bless you. But we are going to talk a few things about mortgages actually today, because of the climate out there, and we need wisdom. But I want to say this because I've been talking to you ad nauseum about this book I'm reading called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And it's been around for a long time. All those people who are in economics probably know it, read it. I just really love it because it's around the mind and heart issues of money. And I'm understanding some things I've never understood before. So, but what is really neat, and I want to say this, David and I try it more than enough not to tell you what to do with your money.
Right.
It is so, and Morgan Housel in his book talks about that. People always ask him, well, what do you do for investing? What are you doing? And then he tells the story of the medical community of doctors. In the past, 100 years ago, they're the doctor decided this is what you need and this is what you have to do, and the patient would do it. It wasn't really this, well, here's option A and option B and option C, which in the last 50 to 60 to 70 years, they've developed more of that, right? When we go to the doctor, we actually bring Google. Your brother's a doctor, and he told us something really interesting. Sometimes when his clients come in, he's like, well, why don't we look that up on Google? And then they actually do it together, and he's showing them, well, yeah, this is what it says. So this is an option, but they're not quite right in this area. So he's actually not despising Google. He's actually visiting Google sometimes with his clients, which I found super fascinating. But the premise is, the point of what I'm trying to say is, doctors are now saying, here's an option for you, A, B, or C. And this is, they're giving you the options with the ramifications involved. And normally a doctor doesn't say, definitively this is what you should do. Although my doctor this week says you got to get more exercise. He did tell me that. So that was a definitive thing.
Well, when you come in with a burst appendix, I know they definitively just say
right.
we're cutting it out.
Right. And when people come to you with mortgage problems, okay, you've got debt here. How are we going to?
Sometimes there is a clear, direction, and it's like, okay, this is what we need to do to get from point A to point B. But the point, and I think you're going to touch on that, is that even in that advice, recognizing that in the end, the decision is yours, and the responsibility for that decision and the consequences of that decision all rest with you. Again, especially
even with an appendix, your recovery is dependent on you.
Well, and I would just, again, we can come up with all kinds of examples.
Right.
There are, some people that say, okay, I don't want a blood transfusion. That's a decision that they make, but that can have, that's directly in conflict with a medical procedure. Or in our case, and I'll maybe use that as a better example here, is, when it comes to fixed and variable, which is the question I get asked about 10 times a day. If you're on the variable, what should you do? If you're on the fixed, what should you do? Because there are two different answers for that. And in the end, we make those decisions and we talk about what the options are. And we say, this is what I think, and this is how I see the world and what I read. And maybe I've read a little more information on Google. No, but I have an opinion. But in the end, when we talk about money, the decision is yours. The responsibility for that decision is yours, and the consequences of that decision are yours and really yours alone. And this is why I often talk about, so as a couple, when I'm talking to a couple, so what do you both think? It's almost more important that you're both united in the decision and that you move forward united than it is the actual decision itself. Because
and when you make a decision, it's your decision. So you can talk about it with your neighbors, and your neighbors can have all kinds of opinions, but it's your decision. You know who you are. God knows who you are. You know your season you're in, and you know the circumstances. And we just wanted
and God certainly does give us counsel in Proverbs to say, yes, go to a multiple of counselors. And as you're thinking through making decision, James 1, ask God for wisdom. And sometimes you ask God for people of wisdom to hear that voice. Again, just saying that in the end, especially, whenever a decision finally is made, that decision rests with you. The responsibility of that decision rests with you. And sometimes not making a decision is making a decision, and that has consequences as well. Those three things.
So, he makes a statement, medicine is a complex profession, and the interactions between physicians and patients are also complex. The same goes for financial advice. And doctors, and he says, doctors and dentists aren't useless. Like, obviously, they have knowledge. They know the odds. They know what works. Even if patients come to different conclusions about what kind of treatment is right for them. Financial advisors are the same. There are universal truths in money, even if people come to different conclusions about how they want to apply those truths to their finances. So as I started on the journey with you as in financial coaching, and as I started working more in the business, business isn't my acumen. I've come to it, but it's not my natural, oh yes, I want to learn everything I can about money. So and I'm sure there's a few of you out there like me, and I just wanted someone to tell us what to do. We get Brent Vandermeer on here, or Bold, and I'm like, just tell me what to do. Do you want me to just tell me? Should I go after cryptocurrency? What's the business this month that I should be putting money to? I just want them to tell me. And they're like, no, it's this and this and this. And then this guy, Morgan Housel, has helped me understand know who you are, that when you go to Dave to talk to him about mortgage or your mortgage broker or your bank, we're going to say things, but it's your decision. It's your responsibility. And there is wisdom we offer that others do offer. Brent offers us wisdom. Bold does like
there's some of the counselors that we have.
That's right. And so it's good, but remember, what Dave and Reb say on More Than Enough, we want to direct you to the Lord. We want to provide some parameters because Dave's going to talk to us a little bit and we'll just segue right into there. One thing I do want to say also, which struck me, know who you are, know what kind of risks you're willing to take, because what you're going to do with your mortgage on variable or fixed might have to do with who you are and what you're comfortable with. And your spouse may not be there either. And what Dave said, you got to do it together. It's more important almost to do it together so that you're in unity on it. So there's not this divisive thing happening that in 5 years you say, well, if you wouldn't have signed on the fixed, we would be fine right now. You got to make some decisions like that. So anyway, I'm saying a lot in a few words because I just want to ask Dave.
And you did finish reading that quote that you wanted to read?
Yes. I did.
Maybe read it again just so we catch it. Yeah.
Financial advisors are the same as doctors and dentists. There are universal truths in money, even if people come to different conclusions about how they want to apply those truths to their own finances. But you have to remember, we're not going to tell you specifically this is how you should do it because it's your life. It's your season, your circumstances. And knowing, this is one thing he says, knowing who you are, knowing your risk level and knowing the end game. Mm-hmm. This is like, we've made decisions about our mortgage right now that I'm trusting Dave for because he knows the end game. We're not waffling back and forth and back and forth. It's okay. We're making this decision. We're not going to be tossed by the wind or the latest economic thing that's happening. We're going in for the long haul.
Yeah. So, again, just picking up on the quote that you read, and this is why I love coaching. This is in fact, why we started a coaching company and not a financial advising company. And just to be clear, when we talk about coaching, what a coach is doing, and if you've been in a coaching relationship, because I know some of our listeners have, and the coach wants to draw out of you really kind of dig through the soil of all of the thoughts and feelings. And so kind of dig through that and bring some of those out onto the table for you. So there's clarity. So often, when you come to us in terms of, and I'm not going to do a infomercial for More Than Enough, but maybe an infomercial for coaching, when you come and you are looking for wisdom and you're looking for, to make a decision, from the quote, he says, you have to know yourself and you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to sometimes face some things that, especially in finance, we talk about, some of our financial decisions are simply driven by fear. Mm. Well, let's acknowledge, first of all, that this is a decision where I'm fearful in. And so then we can apply this to James verses and we can say, I've got no faith for this again. And so if I have no faith for it, then making the decision, I'm going to make it this way one day and that way another day. Mm-hmm. And again, fear is a factor when it comes into here. And so as we talk about that, you may say, just acknowledging that, okay, I'm trying to make this decision, but I am doing so in a position of fear. And we need to, in a sense, address the fear and get that out. And then clarity can come. So if I'm going to give you advice, and all of this back to kind of the advice giving is just to say, if I'm going to give you advice and I'm not afraid, my advice is going to come from a place of not fear. But if you are afraid and you take my advice and do the exact same thing, it is going to end up different. Because you're working from a place of fear, right. And the next decision you make will be from that place of fear. And I may not be in the room and I will say, well, this was a great decision for Reb and I. We're united. We're not working from a place of fear. We've sought some counselors, and this is what we're doing with some of our money in this season. And you say, okay, I'm just going to mirror Dave and Reb. But the next decision you make, I'm not in the room, or you don't, Reb and I maybe make a different decision and we say, oh, things have changed and we better pivot because we see some wisdom in that. Or a counselor has come to us and said, hey guys, it's changed and you need to change with it. And then all of a sudden you're coming back and saying, well, we did what Dave and Reb said and it didn't work. And again, all of that to say, as we talk about some of the questions that are coming, today is not about advice giving.
No, it is. I mean, we spent most of the show telling you we don't want to tell you what to do, but I'm going to just pass this into the question we got from a client was current climate of housing market for a new buyer is really crazy out there right now. Is it still beneficial to purchase a house with a large mortgage? What are the pros and cons for renting versus buying? And there's a lot. We could do 12 shows on this. Where is the market going? Should we go shorter term? Do you lock in? All those are the questions that everybody's asking. That's why I love this question. So is it beneficial to purchase a home right now?
Well, I don't know. Depends on who's asking. Are we going to expect like in 3 years, like if there's a new buyer, should they wait 3 years to see what the market's like? So there's all kinds of ways to look at that question. So why don't we just kind of look at it from a couple of different angles?
Sure.
So number one is traditionally, historically, real estate has appreciated as the years go by. So if I buy this house now, I can, again, we don't know for sure the timing, but we can make the conclusion that it's going to appreciate over time. And that is building wealth. It's building the asset. And so, yes, it's a good time to buy. Anytime is a good time to buy in real estate, making the assumption that it is going to increase over the next period of time. And so, yes, that's good. Will the house that you're buying today be more expensive next year? Likely. But there are dips in the market, and you may find one market drops and all of that. But the reality is possibly. And I would say in a lot of these things, doing some due diligence and saying, okay, that's one factor. Will the house increase in value if I look at it from an asset standpoint? Yeah, most likely. There's very little risk there. Most likely it will.
So even with a large mortgage? So for a first-time buyer. This
goes to the second question, but it goes, let's talk about that house buying right now. Interest rates are very high. They're as high as they have been in the last 15 to 20 years. Let's just say 20 to be general. But they are not like they were in the 80s, where we had 18 and 20%.
Right.
In fact, the interest rates right now on the fixed side sitting between 4.5 and 5.5. That is actually where we've been expecting them to land for the last 10 years.
Right.
We had 2009. We had basically the economic disaster in the US, which did rub up against us here in Canada. Not so significant, but what it did do was keep the interest rates artificially low. And they were artificially low for about 8 years.
Right.
And so during that 8 years, we were saying, you gotta, pay down your mortgage, set your payments,
hedge them. Didn't you?
Hedge your payments, take advantage of these low rates because they're not going to last forever. Now, we didn't expect that those rates would flip within a year. That certainly was
even in our mortgage.
And again, looking at the history, the economics, and all of that, we didn't expect that. But that being said, we are landed right now where most people, even 5 years ago, would have said, yeah, the fixed rate should be between 4 and 5%. If I look at historically, the fixed rate historically is 6%. Over the last 25 years. So the average fixed rate over the last 25 years is 6%. So you're going, okay.
So saying all of that, so looking at, because I was having a conversation with my girlfriend about it, and she was like, okay, yeah, great. But still, people are struggling.
Exactly.
So then do you continue to rent? And here we go. We can't tell you if you should keep renting, but what are the pros and cons of renting versus buying right now?
So, and I will always go back to cash flow.
Okay.
The answer to, in a sense, looking at your cash flow, living realistically and saying, what is my lifestyle and can I maintain my lifestyle with the mortgage or with the rent? It costs about 20% less to rent than to buy, even if your rent and your mortgage payments are the same. There are extra costs when owning a house that there are not with renting. So it is cheaper to rent, even when those payments are the same. But the bottom line is that you have to look at your cash flow and say, if I buy, then this is how it's going to affect my current lifestyle. Right. And if I rent, this is how it's going to affect my current lifestyle. And do I have the 20% margin increase if I'm renting now to go out and buy?
I love that question. If I buy, how will it affect my lifestyle? Yeah, that's a really great question, because some of our own children are saying, there's one pursuing a house and buying, and another is like, well, I want my education. We lived in a cheap rent so we could eat out and entertain and have people over. And even with some health issues between them, they were able to maintain their lifestyle because they lived simply in a rental that was decent rent. So it is really, what do you value? What are your values as a single person? Right. Whether you're divorced, you might be in a new season and you think, I've lost my home. But what is it you're valuing and what's your lifestyle?
We have a couple minutes left, but I was just going to say, and even if you're at the second stage of life and you're saying, so I own a house, and maybe you own it and there's no mortgage on it. But I'm looking around and I'm going, should I sell? Should I buy? What does that look like? And I still go to the lifestyle question of, so when you rent, you can just close the door. And if travel is one of your lifestyle, again, in terms of this stage in your life and you're going to travel more, then boy, there's something appealing just about closing the door and leaving it and letting the landlord take care of what needs to do.
I just heard that from a woman who is separated in financial coaching. And she said, I thought I always wanted to buy, but this is sweet living in a 1-bedroom and I have way less stuff to take care of.
So, and that's a lifestyle choice. And again, there are those that are totally on the other side. And I'll end really with this to say, and then there's people that want to build wealth and want to build the asset. And that's important to them.
Right. Yes.
And they're saying, but that's why I buy a house, because real estate is one of the I would say most common ways all of us build wealth and build assets is we buy a house that we're living in that's appreciating in value every year.
Right.
And so we go, wow, I get to live in a house and I have an asset that is going to appreciate. And if that's important to you, then that's an important decision.
Yeah.
Right.
So basically it goes down to what you're valuing. So if you walk away from here and say, should I buy a house or should I stay renting? What's valuable to you right now? Where is your cash flow at? And you may not know where it's at. So that's where you start. Financial awareness creates empowerment. Give your attention to your finances, and then your awareness will be raised.
Awesome. Well, let me pray.
Yeah.
So, Lord, we started by reading the words of James that said, we come to you for wisdom, but obviously couched in the midst of what James is saying around you are at work in our character. You're at work in what how we think and how we relate to others in this world. And so, Lord, we just say thank you that you are generous in giving wisdom. And we come to you with our questions with faith, knowing that you'll give answers. And so we just pray that today in Christ's name and for his glory. Amen.
All right. Well, thanks to Financial Discipleship Canada for sponsoring our show today, and we'll talk to you next week when we talk money with Ray. Don't miss it.
Let's Talk Money is a division of More Than Enough Financial Fitness, where God is transforming hearts and bringing hope for today and freedom for tomorrow. For more information or to comment on today's show, please visit morethanenough.ca.